Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Staffordshire Police Fire and Crime panel. And today's date is the Monday, the 24th of October 2022. If I could turn straight to the agenda, please. And one is apologies.
I've received apologies from Councillors Peters, Summers and Anne Edgeler, and Councillor Summers has sent a substitute, Councillor Maycock, and Mrs Edgeler has sent a substitute, Ray Sutherland.
Okay. Sorry, Tony. The doors. Okay, thank you for that. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations to declare? I always would add that if the meeting's going on and suddenly something pops up, do not hesitate. Declare your interest at that point. Don't think the opportunity has gone by. 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of September 2022. Do I take those as a correct and accurate record of the meeting held? Thank you. I shall sign those accordingly. Thank you, members. So we go to item 4, and we have questions to the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner from members of the public. We do have one question, and if I could ask Mandy to read that question to the panel, please.
We have received a question from a member of the public. It's to both the panel and the Commissioner. The first question was, in total, how many Police, Fire and Crime panel and ETAP meetings have there been? The response is, over the last 4 years, we've had 23 panel meetings and 22 ETAP meetings. The second question was, out of these meetings, how many times has a member of the public turned up and put forward a question? So the panel do not record the amount of people who attend the meetings or who watch the proceedings, but the number of people asking questions at a panel meetings is 2009, there were 6 meetings, 3 questions were asked, 1 person attended in person to ask the questions. 2020, 3 meetings, no questions, no members of the public attended. 2021, there were 8 meetings, 3 questions, no members of the public attended to ask them. 2022, 6 meetings, 5 questions were asked and 3 members of the public have attended to ask them. For the ETAP meetings, 2000, and this included police and fire ETAP meetings, 2019, there were 6 meetings, no questions, 1 member of the public attended the meeting. 2020, 5 meetings, no questions, no members of the public. 2021, 5 meetings, no questions, no members of the public. And 2022, 6 meetings, no questions, and no members of the public. The information will be in the meeting, in the minutes of this meeting.
Thank you very much. On our papers to note that we have actions arising from previous meetings. We are still waiting for a date to be set for the panel to discuss the recent His Majesty's, I should call it now, inspector's inspection report, and a date for a joint meeting with the County Council's Safeguarding Overview and Scrutiny Committee have been invited to attend, so I think on safeguarding. So just for the note of this meeting. So if I could then move to the 5 discussions published by the police, decisions published by the Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. There are.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just report, there's no published decisions on the website since the last meeting.
Thank you. So item 6 is to receive an update on the medium-term financial strategy. If I could turn to Mr. Adams, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. As promised, this is a sort of progress report on the budget, the MTFS, financial strategy forecast going forward, and we're presenting them for police and fire today. I think the thing I'd just like to say before asking my 151 officer, David, to comment on both the papers for me, is that you will recall that we made some quite prudent, or what I believe to be very prudent, considerations around pay increases and inflation at the end of last year. Thankfully we did, because as it's happened, the circumstances got beyond everybody. Inflation has been considerably beyond what everyone was expecting at this time last year, or certainly at Christmas last year, and the pressure due to pay rises in particular has impacted. You'll see the impact of those in the papers. Suffice to say, other places that made less generous accounting of what might be to come are in a slightly more difficult position. I don't take great pride in that, really. I'm just glad we got it as near to right as we could. But there is, it is an extremely difficult position going forward. There's uncertainty. We have grant settlement figures essentially approved for 3 years for police. We'll be into the 2nd year next time. And they are unlikely to cover increasing costs. So we will be having a good conversation and sharing that with you when we review the MTFS at the end of this year. I'll ask David, if that's okay, Chair, just to take us through some of the key points, and then I'd like just to come back with a comment about some of the assumptions we're making going forward.
Thanks, Commissioner. So, good afternoon, everybody, Chair, members of the panel. Just to reiterate really what the Commissioner's just said. It is a really challenging time at the moment, and it makes my job very difficult with the level of uncertainty, inflationary pressures on pay, to actually forecast how this is all going to play out into the future for next year and into the medium term. But what I'm going to do, Chairman, if that's okay, I'm just going to run through the police report first, and then I'll follow on with the fire report. But it's not surprising, really, that for everybody that there are a number of similarities between the assumptions that I'm going to talk through for both police and fire. There are threads that run through both reports that are fairly common, and hopefully you'll be able to see that as I move through the presentation in the next few minutes. So what both reports have tried to do for the panel is provide an update on the current year's budget position, so where we are against the latest position as at the half year, to provide an update on the MTFS assumptions as we move forward, to look at some of the sensitivities around those assumptions that are included in the paper, look at the budget setting process and the key dates that we've got that will take us forward up to the budget presentation and the updated MTFS for next year, and also as well the paper provides an update on the latest capital spend as well for both police and fire. So if I can kick off, if that's okay, and just pick up some of the highlights for the police report. So firstly, I mentioned that I was going to give an update on the current year position. So for police, the latest outturn forecast at around 232 million is just below, or 0.9 million below, the budget that's been set. So despite the overall inflationary pressures and the in-year position has been managed robustly, and we continue to show a small underspend against the budget that was set. So obviously, just to start off with, that is some good news that I'm pleased to share with the panel today. And I think it provides us with a good basis to move forward into the medium term. But of course, as the Commissioner mentioned, the external and financial environment has changed significantly from that we saw when the panel reviewed the MTFS and the budget back in January of this year. But I think it's fair to say that hopefully, in terms of the position that we find ourselves in, it is challenging. But I'll run through the panel some of the key movements and some of the key variations that we've seen that affect our finances as we move forward. Of course, everybody be aware that inflation and pay awards have tracked higher than forecast. The government has committed at the moment to continue with the current 3-year spending review, as mentioned by the Commissioner, and 23-4, so the next year's budget, when we come to set it, will be the second year of that settlement. So we've assessed the impact of these inflationary pressures, and the paragraph in 1.9 of the report for policing, I'll come to in a moment, just reviews some of those pressures, and we can see the impact as we move into the medium term. The approved MTFS did assume that we would use some reserves, and there was £2.1 million worth of reserves that we'd utilised as we move into 25-26. Now, for presentation at the moment, we've removed that use of reserves, but you will be able to see that. And if we now move to the table on page 3 of the report, I'll just take you through some of the key areas and some of the key movements. So firstly, this table takes us on a journey from the current year 22-3 up to 25-6. As I've already mentioned, if we look at the revised position, we have got a small £900,000 saving forecast for the current year. But then we can see as we move forward into 23-4, 24-5 and 25-6, that gap grows to 4 to 5.6 and to £6.3 million. Now, I'll just take you through some of the key reasons why that gap has increased into the medium term. And firstly, I'd just like to talk about pay, if that's okay. So we find ourselves in a position where for police officers, the pay award that's been agreed is £1,900 per year across all bands. So for Staffordshire Policing, that works out at just over 5% in year. Now, there is some good news, and as the Commissioner mentioned, because we were quite prudent in our budgeting and we budgeted for a 4% increase, therefore the actual award is only 1% above the amount that we'd budgeted, which of course is good news. And also the government have provided us with a small grant to cover off that increase as we move forward. So the net position, certainly for police officers for next year, for this year, we're managing to cover off that increase. Now, as we look to police staff were awarded a 2% pay award from normally the pay award comes from September, but that was backdated to April. So in theory, that was equivalent to around about a 3% award. Now, because the police pay award came in at 5%, what's happened now is that pay award for police staff has been reopened, and it looks likely, and we've incorporated an assumption within this report, that the £1,900 per pay band will be also incorporated into the police staff pay award, as well as police officers. So overall, what we've got when we factor in and a slightly additional assumption, so what we've assumed for 23-4 is because of the way the level of pay awards are at the moment, that actually the assumption that we got within the budget of 2.5% isn't enough. So we've assumed 4% as an increase for next year, and then that tracks back to the original MTFS level. So what you get with that is a hit of around about £1 million per year because of those revised pay assumptions. I'll just move on now, just talk as well about the local government pension scheme. So the actuary Hymans has reviewed the impact of the latest triennial review, and basically, members, that what that has done is it's increased the level of employer contributions. This is primary and secondary, from 15.5% to 21.5%. So that's a significant increase, and based upon the current pay levels at the moment across police staff, that's around about a £1.6 million increase per annum, just for the impact of the increase in employer contributions across for the local government pension scheme. The Commissioner mentioned inflation, and we've got significant impact for, not surprisingly really, for gas, electricity, and obviously for fuel as well as non-pay inflation that goes across some of our supplies and services areas. So this significant inflationary pressure that's driving and contributing to that overall increase in gap as we move forward. Now, I'll try to think of some good news here. The only good news really we've got is that the fact that the returns that we're receiving from the cash that we hold and the cash that we invest, because of the increases in the base rate, we are now receiving significantly more funding, significantly more income from the cash that we invest at the moment. And then finally, we've also got some new savings that have been identified that are incorporated in the report that have slightly reduced that overall gap position. So what we find ourselves in, as it demonstrates on that table on page 3, is that significant increase in gap as we move forward. In terms of income assumptions, I've just covered those off quickly. The assumptions around precept, around government grant, are broadly in line with the MTFS that was agreed earlier within the year. So we've not assumed any changes for precept or for government grant into the medium term. So the budget process is now underway. The timetable is included within page 7 of the report for members to review. With the budget and the updated MTFS is going to be presented to the panel on the 7th of February. So we've only got sort of about 3 months, just over 3 months, to try and firm up some of the assumptions. But of course, we will get the settlement from government probably on Christmas Eve, as it normally comes through. So we will have some certainty around that government funding and that grant, the level of grant as we move forward. Now, just to finish off, obviously, closure of that estimated funding gap will, of course, need to be reviewed as part of this budget setting process. And new savings, and the intelligent use of reserves will also need to be incorporated into that updated MTFS. So, Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions on the updated report before I move on to fire, if that's okay.
Commissioner? Come in.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, David. I would direct panel members to the table that David's taken us through there. It's page 3 within this report, page 11 of your pack, I think. What we've tried to do there is very clearly identify where the MTFS has moved for various reasons. And so a net increase of 1 million is forecast around pay, thanks to that grant, although that was not budgeted for. The one that's caused me some angst is the 1.6 million on the pension. And I think, being as this is a meeting which the public listen into, it's worth remembering that most of the public don't get guaranteed pensions, that they move. An annuity tomorrow is not worth the same as an annuity today. And in the public sector, that is not the case. But again, that's a £1.6 million increase to the cost of employing on behalf of the public that we were not able to forecast for. The inflationary pressures are about 2.3 across gas, electric, fuel. I think people will understand very much where that's come from. Delighted to see that the POM, the operating model, that's the new localisation of the police into their 10 local networks. Tremendous amount of work gone into that, but for little extra investment through the year, which I'm delighted with. We have identified savings and are continuing to do, but even so, let's not miss the point here. If you look at the top right, we were forecasting a 2.1 million gap down the line, 25-26. We're now forecasting a £6.3 million gap. And that is unlikely to be addressed by government grants unless something changes dramatically between now and the new year, which I very much doubt. There is precepts based in at 2.99%, which is essentially our inflation budget, and I may need to look at the practicality of that with the costs rising. Not sure yet whether the government will change their restriction where no area is allowed to increase by more than £10 per annum, but we'll see. You will be aware, with cost of living being such a challenge, that might be tricky too. So hopefully that gives you, firstly, some reassurance that we are absolutely on top of all of this. We know where the numbers are going. We watch these very carefully. We made some very good judgments, and some things have caught us from left field. We won't be the only person or organisation in the country. In fact, if there's one that's guessed all that lot, I'd really like to meet them. I'm alarmed to hear that we're coming to you about the budget on the 7th of February, because that's my birthday. It could be a better day. Really happy to take questions, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Keith Walker.
Thank you, Chair. If your assumptions are right for next year and the year after, a deficit of 4 million and 5.6 and 6.3, how are you proposing to plug the gap? Are you expecting the government grants to cover that deficit, or will those savings have to come from within the force?
Mr. Walker, there's no magic trick, unfortunately, if they don't come from government. One option is to increase precept, but I'll be talking to communities about the realism of that. The alternative is that we will have to review how we do things even more than our current plans. Now, there'll be efficiencies. We're using technology particularly effectively this year. We're getting more capacity from the existing workforce, a growing workforce actually, but we can't be under any illusion. There will have to be savings and efficiencies found. I just mentioned staffing there. We've not, I think, mentioned clearly enough, we're doing really well on the staff numbers, and you know, we don't want to bring in extra officers, train them up, and then find they haven't got the resources to do their job properly. It's absolutely what the public wanted us to do, is get back to a full complement of staff. In fact, we're likely to exceed our recruitment target, and that's good news because it means we can take on a few more, and there is some government grant to support that. I think we're one of just a handful of force areas that are saying we're not only going to hit the numbers, but we'll probably get a few more in as well. So that will be covered. But yeah, the real challenge in the next few months before we come back to you is how are we going to get that gap covered. And I think important, we've got reserves, we've got a very sensible reserve policy, and we've done well on capital recently too, so we're not borrowing to any great degree, even though we've got big projects in line. So short term, reserves will cover if necessary, but we need to be moving ahead with the plan to address that gap.
Adrian Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, guys. Can I just refer to, on the executive summary, item 1.3, please, which on our pack is on page 10, which refers to the recent inspection by HMIC and the plan to put some investment in shortly. We'd get more detail on that later. But I just wanted initially, please, whether, I assume by investment that means financial investment, and if so, do we have any flavour of that, and what's the likely impact on this year's budget, and if so, can that be catered for? Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Adrian, we talked last time about the engaged phase. That's the two particular areas of concern that we're working through very, very visibly and regularly with HMI. But the inspectorate threw up other challenges. As I said, not ones that really took us by surprise, and to a great degree, not challenges that we weren't already working into a future plan. The reason I mentioned the operating model is that is a significant step to not only achieving HMI's outcomes, but also the ones I set out in the strategic plan that the service takes regard of. So reorganising ourselves to create more capacity, answer the phone more quickly, get to sites more quickly, is all part of satisfying the public, meeting their expectations, but also dealing with the HMI requests. So we'll see more, and I'll continue to share with you the detail of things we're investing in and changing. There's been investments in laptops, mobile technology, investments in vehicles, investments in all sorts of things across the service. I would say they're all part of the plan to getting us back to being an outstanding service. There aren't any particular areas where what HMI have asked us to do is outside of our planning anyway.
Thank you. I've now got Councillor Maycock at Tamworth Borough Council.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Commissioner. Hello, everyone. Just want to expand a bit on the inflation that you rightly put the assumptions in this year, which seems to have made the numbers balance. But looking forward, do you think that them assumptions need to be increased now so we can investigate the further savings? Thank you.
I think inflation is the, and apologies, I didn't realise you were behind me there. Inflation is the key challenge for all of us, isn't it? You can see at the bottom of that, those tables on page 3 that we've gone already from to a 5% forecast for this year around pay, 4% for next year from 2.5. And then everybody is hoping that perhaps post-Ukraine we're going to see some return to sort of normal growth mirroring inflation numbers. Quite frankly, I don't think anybody's in a position to say whether those are going to prove to be correct. I think they are reasonable assumptions at this stage. And as I said right at the start, the fact that we were forecasting 4% on pay, 4% on non-pay inflation, 10% on gas and electric, that put us nearer than, I don't know, 42 out of the other 43 forces. There weren't many that were saying that we need to budget on this basis. Regional partners haven't, and it is given them more of an issue. It's extremely difficult to say whether that's correct. What I think is right, and goes to the previous question, both questions actually, is that we need to be looking to accelerate our plans for savings.
Okay. Are there any more questions? Councillor Brian Jones of Cannock Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, just touching upon your last sentence there, where you're talking about various savings, there's mention in the papers about income generation, that you're looking to do more of that. Could you just tell me what kind of amounts of money we're talking about and what area that actually encompassing, please? I'm talking at the top of page 13, where it says the 5th bullet point down, savings will first be sought from increased efficiency, income generation or non-pay spend across both the Commissioner's Office and Staffordshire Police. What's the income generation element?
Outside of grants that are out there, grants that we might bring in, the Commissioner's Office alone's brought in nearly £3 million through Safer Streets funding, for example. But those aren't generally transferable to core business of the service. Beyond what government might do for us and income from residents in Staffordshire, I believe we're somewhat limited. David, have you got any examples of income outside of those core routes?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I think it's a good question, and one of the things that we are seeing this year is some areas of income have exceeded the budgeted levels for this year. So we've got examples of income that's come through from the regional organised crime unit, the ROCU. We've got additional income that's come through from secondments, and so staff being placed elsewhere. And so overall, these are, I guess, just a couple of areas of where additional income is being generated. But as the Commissioner says, these areas are quite limited. It isn't going to answer or solve our current financial position through income generation, but of course it's part of the basket of things that we'll be looking at in order to make sure that we're closing that gap as we move forward.
Chair, Mr Jones may have picked up that some other areas are looking at quite radical conversations actually with other organisations where the service is, you'll have heard before, I've talked about demand and how much of it is linked to particularly mental health related illness. I know that there's some other PCC areas having conversations with their NHS in the locality to say how can they be compensated for work that they feel they're taking on behalf of others. At this stage, we aren't looking at those specifically, but I'm watching the world because in recent years there are areas of public sector that have continued to receive extensive additional funding, whereas others haven't. Now, if that's coupled with cost shunting, for want of a better description, then there needs to be a discussion about that. But I don't think it would be appropriate to sleep soundly thinking that income, certainly not traded income or opportunities around that which we can plan for, are going to solve this problem for us.
Are there anything else to comments, questions to the Commissioner? So I don't envy the situation at all at the present moment with the inflationary pressures that are being put upon us in all sectors. So I hope that, obviously in my view, that, you know, that it looks like you're covering eventualities, but not having that proverbial crystal ball will never necessarily nail it, but I hope that we can keep on track. Okay. Councillor Jones.
Yes, I think we should just say and congratulate both yourself, Commissioner, and David in terms of the prudence that you've shown. You mentioned at the beginning of your speech that perhaps other organisations hadn't. So I'd like to put on record my congratulations of the work that you've done on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, and I'd certainly echo and second that, and I'm sure the committee would like that put on record. So thank you. Okay, so we can now then move on. Item 7, the medium-term financial strategy update for the Fire and Rescue Service.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, regrettably, this is going to feel a little bit like Groundhog Day compared to the previous item. So many of the assumptions and challenges and pressures are shared across these organisations, and no doubt you're having the same conversations back with your council finance teams. I think the extra uncertainty that is worth mentioning again and updating panel members on is the pay negotiations in the fire service. Offers have been made around a 5% deal. It has not been accepted. The FBU are currently balloting their members on their views about that. We are all, and when I say we, nationally, everybody is really hopeful that that offer will be accepted. That offer is beyond what we budgeted for. It is certainly beyond what most services budgeted for. And whilst some fire authorities have positive reserve balances, most don't. We are very nervous, not just about the impact of any strike should it come to that, because of the risk to people, but also the fact that it stops us in our plans to improve the efficiency and modernise our fire service here in Staffordshire. So that is the biggest risk of all at the moment, and adds to the uncertainty about the fire picture. But, Chairman, with your permission, I'll ask David just to take us through the key items here as well, please.
Granted.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Chair. So the Commissioner's covered off some of the points that I wanted to make today. So I'll try and eliminate the duplication from both presentations and try and keep it hopefully fairly straightforward. But if I can just start with exactly the same place we did with police, just a quick update on the current year position. So for the Fire and Rescue Service, the forecast outturn position is broadly in line with budget. So again, despite the overall inflationary pressures and the issues that we've seen this year around pay and inflation across utilities, etc., we're still reporting an overall balanced position, which is of course is good news, and likewise, as we said with police, puts us in a good starting position, ready to move forward. In terms of the overall challenges for the current year, within paragraph 3.8, we've got a schedule in 3.8 that just details the current year and just looks at some of the cost pressures that we're seeing against the budget and how that's being offset with savings. So broadly, we've got around about £1 million worth of additional costs and £1 million worth of savings that we're predicting for the year, that's resulting in that overall balanced position. Now, as we move that forward, as the Commissioner was just saying, within paragraph 4.5 of the report, I've just got a similar table to what you've seen for the policing report. So I'll just run through briefly, if that's okay, just some of the assumptions that we've made. So the first line on there just shows the impact of the support staff pay award. So I'm sure you'll all be aware of the local government pay award that's been accepted by Unison at £1,925 per pay band. Now, I'm not sure actually whether that's been agreed by the other unions yet, but it certainly has it been agreed across the board. We're still waiting. So we're still waiting for one of the other unions to accept that offer, but we're assuming at the moment that will be introduced. Now, interesting, when we look at pay, and I'll just mention this for a moment, if that's okay. When we do apply the 1925 to the lower pay bands in fire, what that does, it still only takes the lower levels of pay in our bottom two grades up to around about £10.90 per hour. So that's still only in line with the real living wage, slightly above the national minimum wage, but we do commit to paying to the real living wage. But even with that increase, our lower level pay grades are still only just at that level. So in terms of the operational staff, as the Commissioner said, that's going out to ballot by the Fire Brigades Union, and that'll go out during November. So we'll hopefully see the results of that towards the end of November. We'll have a better idea whether industrial action will indeed follow at some point, probably during December or indeed into the new year. We've also assumed the same as policing, so we've assumed a pay award for 23/4 up to 4%. So fire had assumed 3% for next year. We've increased that assumption up to 4%. And if you remember, policing was at 2.5%, and that's been increased to 4% as well for next year. For fire as well, we've also got the impact of some savings that have been delivered in year. And importantly as well, we've got £400,000 worth of anticipated savings that are being implemented or have been implemented through our transformational programme. And there's some narrative within the report that just about talks about our minimum crewing, operational crewing arrangements, so that we will now ride an operational fire appliance with a minimum of 4 riders where that is the case on a particular shift. So that negates and reduces the amount of overtime that's being paid in year. And also, as well, importantly, improves the overall well-being of our staff, because we're not asking staff to do significant amounts of overtime, which we were criticised by HMIC FRS for doing so. As with, we talked about investment returns on police, we were also seeing additional investment returns from fire, so we'd actually budgeted a very small amount because the investment returns were running at something ridiculous like less than 0.1%. We're now seeing investment returns of up to 2%, so that's good news in terms of the cash that we invest. And then also as well, we've got the inflationary pressures that we're seeing that are coming across, not only from fuel and from utilities and from supplies and services, but also our unitary charge payment that we make for our 21 PFI fire stations. Part of that unitary charge payment, around about 30%, is on a variable is variable and increases annually by RPIX. Now, since our PFI came in back in 2010, RPIX has been very low, but this February RPIX came in at 8.3%. So we saw a significant increase of 300,000 in our unitary charge payment that we're estimating as well will continue into next year as well. And then finally, the Home Office have announced that as part of our airwave system, so this is the system that is used for emergency calls. We receive a grant annually to offset some of those costs. That grant, the Home Office have now indicated, will be removed into the medium term. So we've taken that out. So for fire, we started off with a gap of around about 2 million, and we're expecting that to increase to about 3.2 million into the medium term. So I think it's just worth noting then, so in terms of, again, in terms of our intelligent use of resources, in terms of our transformational programme and the work that's been presented to the Commissioner, we're going to need to look at that very closely as we prepare for next year's budget and the medium term, to look at some of the other areas of transformational work that we might need to consider as we move forward. Just a quick one in terms of the budget process that is now underway within fire, and the full timetable again is included within the report. And as I mentioned, the budget and the MTFS update will be presented to the panel on the 14th of February. So that's a week after the Commissioner's birthday, which I need to note, by the way. So, Chairman, obviously happy to take any questions on the fire report. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any questions? Councillor Brian Jones.
Yes, I'm sure there's a good answer to this, but I noticed in the police graphs for gas, electric and fuel that 2 years down the line we were looking at 2%, yet for fire you're looking at 5%. Is that because the fire service naturally uses a lot more in terms of that?
That's a good question, and one I'll try and answer the best I can. But basically, the assumptions that we'd included within the approved MTFS were slightly different between policing and fire, and the main reason for that really was just a slightly different view from finance directors from policing and into fire. So we just made a slightly different assumption. I think for fire we've assumed that utility costs would increase slightly more than they were going to in policing. But in terms of the actual contracts that are utilised for gas and electricity, they're all procured through the county council contract. So what will happen, councillor, is we'll have a much better position as we move through the winter to see quite what the impact of those costs are, because the price cap we don't believe is quite going to kick in as much because we're procuring those gas and electricity at a cheaper rate anyway. So we're watching really and how that plays out this year in order to put together an assumption that we'll take forward that's the same across both. It's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner?
Chairman, it's actually a very good question, and I hadn't spotted that. It's something that we will be discussing. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further questions? Again, on a similar note, I think this is all going to be, you know, as I said before, within our inflationary targets and everything else that we're having to deal with, and obviously the pay review in question as well, and how that will impact if whatever result comes from that. Did you want to come in on that, Commissioner?
Yes, please. Chairman, you're quite right. It's very similar in some ways to police. I guess something that I think is positive is that we do have quite an extensive list of areas to consider for savings in fire. I've asked that some of those that we felt we could put into the reserve box need to be brought out again and reconsidered because of the certainty around what the minimum pay rise will be. There will be implications because we haven't got that in the budget. But I think it's also important to note that I've talked before about the white paper around fire. We're likely to hear very soon about further findings as a result of Grenfell, Manchester and so on. And if anything, if yesterday's anything to be based on, we'll be talking about flooding again pretty soon as opposed to droughts and wildfires. There's an awful lot of change that could potentially come with the fire service, and I'm very keen with colleagues to get in and talk to the new fire minister just about not forcing us into a position where we react to make savings only to find that a year down the line we've been asked to do more and we're reinvesting again. You know, losing professionals just to bring them back again 1-2 years down the line to do more for the service would be a really missed trick. So it's an interesting environment, but pretty challenging.
Okay. Oh, Adrian Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. This is really a comment rather than a question, but bear with me if you could. But we might all be aware there's one or two things going on in Downing Street today, and we live in a pretty uncertain environment. And looking at the state of the national economy, the threat of more pressures on public spending look going to be pretty severe. So I guess really yourself, Commissioner, you've got to be aware that down the line we could be under a lot more pressure than we are now. I was reading that the police service is one of the few areas that haven't suffered quite so much in the last year or two in terms of squeeze. But looking ahead at what's coming, life could get pretty difficult. So it's good to see that the budget is well under control and we've got some reserves. But this conversation in 6 months' time could potentially be quite different, I think.
If I may, Chair, I agree. I think it's very uncertain. It's actually a better picture today than it was yesterday, believe it or not. The markets and forecasts are bouncing around to a huge degree. What we're very conscious of is that whilst there are mandate commitments, particularly to policing, which are helpful around supporting those extra officers and so on, there's less certainty around the fire service. There really is an expectation that we would like the service to be more modern, more professional, but also to do more, and that means a conversation. And at the moment, all the pay conversations are without that element of, well, what can we do more or extra? We've not engaged in that with the unions as yet. So it is a challenging position. The other danger is that if there's austerity like we've seen before, then other organisations that might have shared some areas of costs with us in the past are less likely to do so. And that's particularly challenging in the commissioning environment, where we share commitments to things like support for domestic abuse victims and so on with authorities. If everybody is in a difficult place, sometimes it's services you don't necessarily think of in the first instance that find they are compromised. So, yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, the recommendation is the panel is to note the information contained within the updated MTVS report. Can I have your okay to proceed? Thank you very much. Thank you. So we move on to item 8, which is the Fire and Rescue Annual Assurance Statement 2021-22. Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really good report, I think. It sort of brings together a lot of the strategic documents, the delivery plan of the service. It's one we're required to do, I believe. At the moment, you are seeing something that is called a draft. That is because our Ethics and Audit Committee need to sign off the audited accounts in a few days. Quite frankly, I would expect this document to change not at all between now and its final version. But, Chair, we will distribute to you the final version as soon as that's available. It's a statement of where the service is. I welcome the sort of change in some of the headline language, because that's more in line with the strategic plan that we're all working to. And there's some helpful stats about our service. I think it sort of is what it is. You can see that the demand is increasing as a result of coming out of lockdown and pressures such as climate change, etc. But I think, for me, I'll be going into this in a great deal of detail on the 9th of November at our public performance meeting. That's when Helen and I will speak to the Chief Fire Officer, ask him and his team to take us through their latest performance in detail. And just on that point, it was really very welcome to see members of the panel at the public performance meeting with the Chief Constable the other day, where I hope they saw the sort of depth we're going into every time we speak to them, but also the depth of information that we're bringing to the public, which is not ordinarily the case, but something I think is important, that the public see what I'm seeing. So happy to take any questions here. David, anything I've missed on that, the formalities of that report?
I don't think so, Commissioner. I think just the point that the Commissioner raised around the 21-2 accounts for the Fire and Rescue Authority. So we have received the audit findings report from Grant Thornton, and the statement of accounts will go to ETAP on Monday. So we've got one or two areas just to resolve this week, but we're hoping, well, we're hoping that an unmodified, unqualified opinion will be given on Monday so that this document can be finalised. So thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, I haven't got anybody indicating to speak. I think it's clear that this before us here is for information and for us to obviously take note, because indeed actually the paper that is presented is for the board rather than the panel. But I do thanks for the information. So the only thing that I would add, that it keeps you abreast of the situation that's going forward, and I think that's what the key to the report is for future deliberations. Yeah. So on that, thank you for bringing that to us. It is appreciated. So if I may then go to item 9, which are questions from the panel members to Ben Adams. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Commissioner. A few weeks back, I think we had an email conversation that the traveller strategy was going to be implemented and soon coming out. I was just wondering when that will be out. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, I believe I mentioned at at some panel meetings prior to now that I've established a community safety forum which meets across the whole force area. So this is an opportunity for us to discuss with community safety partnerships, county and city together, things where we've got shared interests and perhaps want to do it once. And one of the things I felt was important was to take account of the new legislation related to illegal trespass, some of the stuff in the police crime and sentencing bill, and endeavour that all the community safety partnerships and the police had a shared view of what that meant. So pleased to say, it's taken us a few months, but we have come up with a revised protocol. Tamworth were represented at the forum, I think, last week. Chair, you were there, I believe. And essentially, we're signing that off as a way forward. The new legislation has been used, I think, 2 or 3 occasions during this summer. And what has really helped, Councillor Maycock, is this sort of wider understanding of the role that each partner organisation plays in managing things when they don't go as planned, but also our responsibilities around individuals and particularly safeguarding children within those communities as well. So it's been a really valuable piece of work. I'm pleased that we've done it once, and I think what we'll be doing now is also communicating more widely about what we've learned from it. One thing we have learned from it, and there were 2 or 3 examples in Tamworth which were particularly useful, is that we must tell the communities what's going on. Because sometimes requests have been made of courts for eviction orders or other legalities. There is a delay, and I think the community can say, well, has anything happened here? And we need to be saying, in advance of them asking, this is what's happening, this is when you might see such and such. And by the way, half of what you're hearing on social media is not true. So also clear information about what is happening and what isn't happening, because I'm afraid if we don't get that right, we're going to unduly alarm people, and we would all want to avoid that. But I thank the councillor for his particular interest in this, because it is something that residents raise with us, and I'm hoping it will be a more consistent approach from now on.
Thank you. Do you wish to come back, Councillor?
Thank you. Yeah, just to emphasise what you've just said, communication, totally key. That to councillors as well, so we can relay it to the communities. I think it's very important. Thank you.
Councillor Phil Hudson, East Staffordshire County.
Yeah, Ben, could you send a copy of that policy to all the councillors? Because it's glad to hear it's been used a couple of times in the county, but it seems to be not used everywhere. And there were some instances in East Staffordshire, I think, in the year where, I mean, I wasn't involved because it wasn't my ward, but there was some sort of suggestion that things could have been done better. So if all of the local councillors at East Staffs are aware of what the policy is and who should do what, that would be really helpful, please. Chairman,
What I would try to do there is, I think, make sure the CSPs have all got the latest, and then perhaps I'll encourage portfolio holders for community safety to share that out with their colleagues.
I agree. Thank you. Any other questions? I haven't got any, so thank you. Oh, Councillor Ryan Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question about the POM, the Police Operating Model, and the fact that Chief Inspectors across Staffordshire are now meeting with the public to listen to them. I mean, that's quite an innovative idea, really, and I don't think it's probably happened much in other places in recent years. It may be too early to tell, but do you think this is having an impact on public reassurance, where they're actually going out and meeting the public?
Thanks, Councillor Jones. I expect it to. I think anybody who's on, who keeps an eye on Twitter or that sort of thing will see that there's been a big increase in the amount of information going out for each locality. So not just a sort of Staffordshire police message, but it'll be a Tamworth message or a Cannock message or a Stoke North message. And as such, it carries more weight with the residents. There's an operation the police are running at the moment called Op Cadence, and it was somewhat delayed because of the abstraction of officers to help with the Queen's passing, unfortunately, but also a very busy summer. But they are now really out there, not just chief inspectors, but right across the ranks, PCSOs, officers too, meeting people in community spaces, engaging where they can, whether it's in a coffee shop or a village hall or whatever. The service recognises that it was not perhaps as clued in to where the local hotspots are and the nature of the issues locally as they could have been. And this is something I've been talking to them about since the day I landed, and I'm absolutely delighted the new model allows for the conversation. I think as councillors sometimes we're quite lucky because people will pick the phone up to us or we'll bump into them. It's not quite the same if you're a normal, say normal, if you're a non-councillor resident. Be careful there. But that communication matters, and it's about visibility and it's about confidence, but it's also informing the local team. This is the stuff that matters in my patch.
Thank you. Councillor Phil Hudson.
Yeah, Commissioner, it's all about moving forward now, and I think we're all well aware of what the past held, and I have every confidence in you and the new Chief Constable in moving this force forward. What we could do with this, and I don't know how you can do this, but we would like an update from you at certain times in the year to tell us how we are moving forward in addressing the issues that were brought by the inspector's report and how you are monitoring that, because we're really interested. And I know it's an uphill struggle, and it's great that we've now got 10 BCUs, so we've now started to address the issues. But what we want is some idea of how we are starting to improve, how this is impacting on the public, because as you said, we keep getting all the negative stuff that come to us from the public, and it's nice to actually say to them, well, actually, it's not all bad. There's a lot of good stuff happening as well. But, my experience is that local people just look at local issues, how it's affected them personally, and that's what they think. What they don't realise is, we've had a lot of good drugs seizures in the last few weeks. County lines, been some very good stuff. Been a lot of traffic stuff done with the road policing teams. But it's the local issues that they're more interested in and how it affects them. So I just wondered how you're going to sort of monitor how the improvements are improving. It'd be nice to keep us updated, please.
Chair, if I may, I'll continue to keep regularly bringing you updates on what's happening here. Most important for me is those public performance meetings. I have one every 4 months with the Chief Constable, where you will hear Helen and I ask him the direct question. Helen will be saying, what's happening with roads policing? Why are our killed and seriously injured this year? I'm talking about contact times, response times, investigation qualities. So it is a constant, continual dialogue. The Chair has asked if I would consider coming to a meeting with the Safeguarding Board here as well to discuss progress on the HMI. I'm still in conversation about exactly what that means, what I haven't already told you, certainly at the last meeting. What can we share around the process to give you more comfort? I think a key thing for me is this is also about communication, not just by me to you, but by the service to the wider public. Now, here is not just us available so you can tell us what needs sorting out, but so we can share with you the progress we're making in various areas. And where there are headline improvements, you can be sure I'm going to make sure people know they're happening, because it's important, especially when we're going into a council tax round next year. People will want to know, are we on track to get back to being one of the best services in the country? We need to see the evidence and prove that the plan is working.
Do you wish to come back on that?
No, I think that's fantastic, and it's nice to be able to go to parish council meetings as a borough councillor and give good news to the local communities. You know, unfortunately, there hasn't been many opportunities of late to do that. And just a bit of feedback is that sometimes when our officers are talking to members of the public, perhaps they ought to be mindful of what they say and how they come across. Because I've had quite a few instances of late where it didn't go down too well, and if they'd have thought about what they said and how they communicated with the members of the public, I think it could have addressed some issues without them having to come and complain to me as a councillor.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you, actually, because we had the area inspector into the parish assembly. We bring a lot of our parishes into the chamber and we can listen to them. And I'm glad she sat there and explained things. And just to say about the policies of the travellers, they were moved on to the car park in Cheadle, and within 2 hours they were moved. So I think everything you're doing at the moment is over the moon and satisfactory. But we can get the word out quite quickly. So thank you again for what you're doing. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear they're at the Assembly, and if any of you are involved in bringing a number of local councils together, I'm going down to Purton again to talk to 4 or 5 council represented. I'm very happy to come out in evenings to talk to, what I'd prefer not to do is talk to 2 people one night and one the next. If we can get 20 or 30 together, have a good set of questions and knock about, that really works well. And I'm conscious, Tony, I couldn't make the overview and scrutiny in Moorlands the other day. There was a diary issue and then Helen was poorly. It just got beyond us. But I'm coming in January and I would be happy to speak to all of your overview and scrutiny committees individually. And I believe, Jackie, we were at the City Council the other day briefing members on progress, where the chief and one of the superintendents joined me as well. So we are trying to get that message out, because I recognise that you are in the business of communicating. Some of the police officers and PCSOs aren't as skilled as you. So if I can give you a message, I know you'll get it to at least 5,000 people within 24 hours.
May I, Chair? Going back. Yes, we will. It'll be quite easy. And you've got an invitation to the next parish assembly, because I'm the chair. Thank you.
We're going to keep you busy, Commissioner. So I think that concludes then the questions regarding from the panel members. Moving on to item 10 is dates of future meetings and the work programme. Members got anything to add or wish to discuss regards to the work programme? Obviously, we, as I alluded to earlier in the meeting, we are wanting that HMI appeal report meeting, and with a safeguarding at the overview and scrutiny of the county, which I think will be very important. And as soon as that date can be looked at and published, I think it'll show that we are taking it seriously, as obviously it's a serious subject. So if there aren't anything to add to our work programme, members, and discussion, I'm happy to close the meeting at 3:10. Thanking you for your attendance and safe journeys home to wherever you're going. So thank you all. And thank you, Commissioner, for your report. Thank you.